I'm J.D. Green. I've been a face on the radio in Vermont for well over 20 years. And although I've loved my career in radio, I had a vision about bringing my connection to the community to a different platform, to social media, where I could create a blueprint of a podcast that's something constantly evolving, knowing that there's always room for new experiences and learning, discovery, exploration, new questions to ask, and answers to be sought after. A program without limitations, but still with intention to tell a more in-depth story behind what makes us tick, what inspires us, what makes us realize that the what and when is only secondary to the how. And it's the how and the why that I want to uncover. It's my hope with this podcast that I can inspire, inform, that we can learn together and tell the bigger stories behind our lives. That's our story. My real story off the air. I'll try to push the boundaries, arouse your curiosity, and ask the questions you want answers to. Maybe questions no one's asked. The good and the not so good. What's going on in Vermont as well as across our great country. Things you'll agree with, things you might not. It's my hope to laugh with you, cry with you, entertain and enlighten you, but mostly learn with you. Please make sure to support your local public access TV station, subscribe to my YouTube podcast, Aired Out, engage by sharing your comments, and invite your friends to be part of it too. Thanks for tuning in. This is Aired Out. And a good Wednesday evening. Welcome to Aired Out. I'm J.D. Green. Our sponsors, Fly on the Wall Productions and CVTV, Public Access Television 192 and 194 at CVTV723.org. Peak Entertainment of Vermont, New Hampshire, weddings and parties, special events, peakdj.com. FGB Theaters, the Capitol Showplace in Montpelier and the Paramount Theater in Barrie, home of the FGB movie card and the $5 Ticket Tuesdays, gift cards as well. Don't forget about them, all at fgbtheaters.com. Proud to have them as a sponsor. CBDcrave.com, Chris and the gang, serving up superior quality brands shipped straight to your door. Quench the crave at cbdcrave.com. And Fontaine Forestry and Millworks of East Montpelier, native lumber, custom cut, rough, kiln dried, plain, tongue and groove, shiplap, hemlock. The hemlock bark mulch is going to be very popular, coming up very, very soon. Buy the yard or the bag, Route 14, just below Bragg Farm. And CW Print and Design in Barrie, cwprintdesign.com. They're open 8 to 6 Monday through Friday, Saturday 9 to 5. They turn my stuff around same day most of the time. They are absolutely amazing, and I love their new store. My guest is a Vermonter who is a face of maple syrup, dare I say, the face of maple syrup in our state at, I'm thinking almost, my guess is about 70 years old. He continues the tradition that his family started long ago, making maple syrup. And today, the Morse Farm and the Morse Farm Maple Sugar Works has become an empire. Burr Morse right next to me. Glad to have you in here, man.
Thanks for having me, JD.
You look a little on the tired side, bud. I was so blessed to hear that you were going to be a guest on my show this time of year because you are so busy right now, as I can only imagine. But you have some team members, right? That are
Well, we do, and you know, yes, I would say I was sticking my neck out to say yes to you, but the way blessings work, you know, today is an off day for sugaring. It's too darn cold for sap to run, so here I am, and I'm happy to be here.
Maple Open House Weekend this past weekend. How was it? Bit popular place to go, Morse Farm.
It was huge for us. It really, really was. There were cars parked right out in the road. Of course, it's mud season, and so our yards are a bit on the muddy side, and It's just we have a certain magic to our place, and that's one of the places people really want to go. But yet Murphy's Law stepped into Maple Open House weekend like it always does. And it was a weekend where the weather wasn't quite right for sap to run, and many people that were not boiling.
Yeah. Is it my imagination, or were there a few sugar houses that were boiling a few weekends ago?
There probably were a few that boiled way back in February, as has been the case in the last few years. We have had a bit of sugaring in the February, but this year it lasted very little time. It might have been one day of boiling, and at our place we're never quite ready to catch sap that early. We've got a lot of trees, but they're in different places. We're not blessed with a bunch of trees just all flowing right to the sugar house. So we have a lot of equipment to set up and sap to haul. And
how many taps, how many trees, how many gallons is a good measure for Morse Farm?
Well, we have 5,000 trees or taps, holes drilled in trees, and suppose we make 2,000 gallons. The very optimum amount would be 2,500, a half a gallon per tree, but we don't quite reach that because we need to keep honing our equipment and our tubing. So if we make 2,000 gallons in a season, that would mean we boil through 80,000 gallons of sap.
Wow. And the ratio is no longer 40 to 1. We're going to talk about that. But, I got to tell you, just last week I was in Florida. Man, you cannot find maple syrup anywhere.
Really?
I couldn't. I couldn't.
Well, maybe I should put up a branch operation.
Well, I mean, we went out to breakfast a few times, and you walk in, and there's Aunt Jemima.
Oh, no. In many of those places, they're going to call it maple syrup. You ask if you have maple syrup. Oh, yeah, we got it.
Well, and a lot of them, here's the amazing thing, and you probably won't be surprised by this, is a lot of folks that are down south don't know what maple syrup is, real maple syrup, and where it comes from.
They don't. There's huge confusion about it. Where it comes from, what time of year. Many times people come to our place in July and think, why aren't you making maple syrup? Well,
exactly.
They don't know, but when we tell them, they understand.
Wow. I don't know where to begin with you. You know, the famous kettle corn that you have, your world famous maple creamies that are made with real maple syrup. I mean, this award-winning stuff that's coming out of those walls there, brother.
Well, thank you, J.D. And there's industries in the U.S. and other countries around the world that have been driven out by Chinese competition, whatever.
Sure.
Or changes of technology, but the maple industry, I think, is one that's pretty darn secure because it's only done in a small part of North America, and that's the only place in the world.
So Canada is the only one that leads Vermont, but Vermont's number one in the nation for
Vermont's number one in the nation, pretty small compared with Canadian production, but number one, and then follows maybe Maine and New York State, upstate New York.
Yeah.
But it's done as far out west as Minnesota and as far south as I found that one of the farthest sap buckets west out in Iowa one time.
Yeah.
There's a sugar maker, and then I went to the farthest sap bucket south one time in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Wow.
So it's wider spread than you might think, but yet just a tiny place in the world where it's possible to do it.
Speaking of sap buckets, how about that old boy out in the Champlain Valley that had, 130 or 140 sap buckets stolen?
Oh, that's absolutely pitiful that any mind would work that in that flawed a way.
Now, you're in the Vermont legislature.
No, I'm not.
You were, weren't you?
No, I'm too smart for that.
Are you? All right.
No, never been interested.
I thought you were very involved. Well, I know you were up at the State House quite a bit over the years.
Well, I've testified. I've gone
you've
down there. I
testified.
was a page boy way back in 1961.
Yeah.
There, but you know, both my grandfathers were politicians, and they didn't pass their political genes on to me at all.
No, they didn't.
No, they
Did
didn't.
you get up to the State House and speak at all about the FDA and the asinine decisions that they were trying to make for us?
I don't recall that I ever spoke on a legislative level or a congressional level on it. I think I wrote a letter or two just to register my thoughts as a maple sugar maker, because that was just absolutely absurd what
Can you
they were
believe
trying
it?
to do.
What were they trying to do?
Well, I think I recall right that there's an effort in this country, of course, for people to be healthier,
Sure.
and sugar sometimes can stand in the way of that health. And so the FDA, it was on a national level, it was decided, why don't we set a threshold above which, a threshold for sugar above which we need to put special language that additional sugar is added. And it may be harmful to your health, something like that.
Yeah.
And so since maple syrup is 100% sugar, it triggered that threshold, and they decided, well, we got to have them put the words sugar added. Our 100% sugar is pure sugar, unrefined, right out of a maple tree.
Sure.
It's like honey. It's
Right.
a chemically a better sugar for a human body.
Right.
And by gosh, we don't add sugar to our maple syrup.
Well, it's illegal. First of all, it would be illegal.
We'd be in behind bars,
Yeah.
and abiding by the law at the same time.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I know. So how did that result? Did it just kind of fizzle out, or was Vermont exempt from this FDA rule?
You know, don't let it ever be said that bureaucrats can't once in a while back down and admit they were wrong, because all of our letters and all of our protests about that, I guess they heard finally, and they abandoned that. They exempted maple from that rule.
So one of the things I want to talk with you about is your interesting, some say crazy brother, Elliot. Man, is he a character. I love that guy. I see him every year at the Tunbridge World's Fair. He is so interesting and so fun to chat with. He's kind of the mad scientist, isn't he, with the whole maple cream thing?
Well, he's made the maple cream at our place for a long time, and he's been heavily in evidence at our place, and he's a good worker, and he's got common sense, and he's a Vermonter, and he's my brother, and I love him. And my son Tom also is a younger. He's the 8th generation of Morses who have made syrup right in this central Vermont area, and he's up moving our whole setup up to modern standards, and something I wouldn't be capable, neither I or Elliot would be capable of doing.
Yeah, the technology, I wanted to ask you about technology with maple sugaring is such a big thing now. It's all about how fast can we turn it around, how can we work smarter, not harder. And with reverse osmosis coming into the picture and vacuum lines, I mean, this is a technology that, what would your dad say about it? Would he be in favor of it?
I think he would, yes. I know my dad enough to know that he wouldn't have put it down, because he knew that you know, you have to move in order to maintain. You can't do it. For instance, people come to our place, and when they express disappointment that we use tubing or we have a reverse osmosis machine, I say, Can you name any agricultural enterprise in this country that hasn't had? Is your neighbor farmer still going out with a team of horses to plant and plow?
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
So why should we be held to that?
It's the same end product.
It's the same, and there's purists out there that will say, "Oh, I don't like it anymore. They've screwed up the taste of maple with all their modern." That's bunk. That's absolute bunk. They've had blind tasting over at Proctor Maple Research Center, UVM, and the blind tasters could not taste the difference between syrup made through the benefit of RO and vacuum, as opposed to that was made the old-fashioned way. They couldn't taste the difference.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same product.
Yeah, it's. Would your dad say it's cheating?
Maybe a little bit. He wouldn't want to let anyone totally off the hook. But, you know, we're at the mercy of weather.
Sure.
Right down to the wind direction.
Yeah. What's that? Is that a fable? The whole wind direction thing. That wind direction and temperature and all that and. I'll ask you that first. I got another question for you, but go ahead.
Well, let me see if I can come up with a little fable, a little poem. When the wind is in the north, the sap runs forth. When the wind is in the east, the sap runs least. When the wind is in the south, the sap runs drouth. When the wind is in the west, the sap runs best.
Yes.
And it's
northwest.
North and west are good. East and south are bad. And it's not because the south warms things up. That's one thing my father used to say, and I don't agree with him. The way I understand it from the scientists is that the tree's inner pressure has got to be greater than the atmospheric pressure for sap to run out the wound we make.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, doesn't hurt the tree.
I was going to ask you that. It heals right up.
Yeah.
Scars. It's scar tissue.
Just like a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we use vacuum. We have the tubing, which is an airtight system, and it's easy to inject vacuum right into it. And vacuum's negative pressure outside the tree in that tubing system, well, it's going to trick those trees into having greater inner pressure, and they run.
Right. Wow.
So on days where it used to stop running because of an east or a south wind, now it keeps on. And with optimum vacuum, we can double our take of sap from 10 gallons per tree up to which makes a quart of maple syrup, up to 20 gallons per tree, which makes a half gallon of maple syrup.
Can we kill a tree by putting too much vacuum on it or pulling too much sap out of it?
No. We can't, and people would argue with me, those purists, again, but I've tried to kill trees before. I had a crop tree. I had a crop tree here and a what I wanted to be a cull tree right beside it.
Yeah.
And I put multi-spouts into the cull tree.
Interesting.
That I need to kill this sucker anyway, and I'll do it this way instead of a chainsaw.
Yeah, interesting. Wow.
And 10 years in a row I did that, and that wouldn't die.
So 25 at night, mid-20s at night, mid-40s during the day, that's pretty much optimal sugar and weather.
Yes.
And what you want for that ratio to be prolonged as much as possible.
And that's where our nail chewing right now today comes in big time, because here it is the 1st of April.
Yeah.
And it's apt to warm up by mid-April to a few 70-degree days, and that'll ruin it.
You've had that happen many times. And even recently, I remember we shot well into the 60s. I think there was, and then you've had other ones that'll take you right into May.
We haven't had anything this year that worries me temperature-wise. But yes, there was one year I remember recently. I think maybe it was 2012. We just got started sugaring the first part of March and had a good week of sugaring, and then it turned to summer.
Yeah, I remember it.
For 10 days in a row.
Yeah.
And we lost it. Sugaring was over. Done. Yeah, so
it doesn't spring back if the weather springs back.
Well, it can. And you know, one thing that warm weather does is to start the bud activity.
Yeah.
And you get a buddy, bitter, putrid, awful tasting maple syrup.
Really?
So we have had years where the buds started because of warm weather, and then it turned back to freezing 25s and 40s. Sap started running again.
Yeah.
But all of the syrup made after that point was buddy, bitter, putrid tasting stuff.
Interesting.
That can happen.
So you're right around 70 is my guess?
My age?
Yeah.
I just turned 71.
Wow. So you started sugaring with your mom and dad, your family,
Yes.
I'm guessing,
Yes.
when you were how old?
Oh, when I was 5, we moved to the farm we are now, and I remember getting in the way around the sugar house when I was 5. And before that, our sugar house was up in Calais, 8 miles up the road. So, and I was part of that then. But of course, I didn't become worth anything until I was old enough to carry gathering pails full of sap.
Did you learn how to swim in Curtis Pond?
Oh yeah, sure. That's where we came from.
Wow. So what about the snow on the ground? That's something I'm always curious about. If you got your 25s and your 45s, but you don't have a deep snowpack, is that going to make a difference?
We've had good years before with low snow winters, several of them, but I would say it's the having a good deep snowpack is added insurance, because it does two things to my way of thinking. It provides moisture, it provides water that's going to go into the ground, and all sap is groundwater that's being taken up by the tree roots. So the more the sap, the more the water they have available, the better. And snow will also refrigerate a little bit through a warm spell. So if come mid-April we get a couple 65-degree days or something, and we still have some snowpack back in the woods, we could possibly escape that to a return of good sugar weather.
Interesting. Now, what about the whole grading change that happened not too long ago? Vermont, all of a sudden we decide we've got to change the... Why?
Well,
for the tourists?
Well, here I am. I may end up cursing the bureaucrats again.
That's all right. That's good.
You know,
hey, man, the name of the show is Aired Out. You can go right ahead.
To my understanding, and I'm not putting them down, it was done carefully over a lot of time, and it had the stamp of approval of the Vermont Sugar Makers Association and the Agency of Agriculture people. And the way I think I understand it is, there's even though syrup is made in a small part of the world, there's quite a lot being made now because of vacuum and increased volume and stuff. So there's markets that have to be opened up around the world in order to not have a surplus. We have to sell it. And the way one of the experts explained it to me was, we want to adhere to the same grading language of every other maple producing place, which is Quebec and Ontario and all the U.S. states. We all want to call it use the same language in order to have a chance of fitting into those new markets that we're all reaching out for.
Sure.
And the part that I don't quite understand there is it seems it kind of homogenizes the Vermont image, and it seemed to me if we stayed different than all the rest of the syrup making areas, maybe our brand would just grow. But they know more than I do, and the new grades haven't hurt me. People are just confused about it.
Yeah, you're pulling in anywhere from 400 to 500 tour buses. That's a lot of people coming through your doors.
Well,
Mr.
it is.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's our specialty. A lot of people couldn't do it. They wouldn't be able to. And believe me, I get punchy with crowds. Some, but I'll be darned if I'll mean mouth them or drive them away or anything,
Yeah.
because that's our business. And basically, I love those people. They're
And
so many.
you've
of them.
seen the expressions on people coming from foreign countries who step off that bus and they taste maple syrup on their tongue for the first time in their lives, and you've seen all kinds of different expressions, I would imagine.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you ever had folks that oh, I don't like this at all?
No, well, only youngsters from, and they're usually from cities in this country, and they've grown up on that junk
Sure.
with all sorts of preservatives and red dye number 2 and stuff like that.
Corn
and
syrup.
Corn syrup, and that's what they think they like best.
my
And
God.
some of those kids will turn up their nose at real maple.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, they're just not giving it a chance. They've got a preformed opinion, and
Yeah.
that's what they're gonna want. But as a rule, anyone who tastes, I mean, we've just come up with a new product at our place called maple butter,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that is a heavy amount of both maple syrup and dairy butter. Can you imagine
Oh, my God.
a combination of those two things being something anyone would dislike?
Right. Yeah, right. I know. I was up at Morse Farm a few weeks ago when you had your sugar on snow. And first of all, what the hell is going on with the whole pickle? What's the pickle about? Why would you want to ruin this amazing sweet taste with a sour pickle?
Come on.
Why? Why would you want to do that? I never understood the pickle.
Watch your mouth, baby. I grew up with dill pickles.
Well, I mean, nothing against dill pickles, but with maple syrup, I don't. And a donut? Why the donut?
Speaking of the Vermont brand, I think that's part of the Vermont brand, which other maple syrup making areas don't necessarily have. Yeah. And I don't know whether it was the pioneers or the Indians before that who chose a pickle, but it's sweet and sour. The sour counters the sweet, and you can eat it better and more of it.
Well, what's the purpose of the donut then?
The donut is an unsweetened yeast donut.
Okay.
And I've even seen Vermonters who put on their literature pictures of sugar on snow, and you see one of these old-fashioned hand-cut donuts, and I say, come on, folks, that's not tradition. You got to use a raised donut.
Yeah, that's right. Of course. You know, I was also badgered pretty good at the Morse Farm when I was there for Sugar on Snow by by my wife and some friends. They were making fun of me because I was eating all of the snow, and I took it a step further and even drank the snow, the water, the sugary water. Is there a problem with it? Is that sacrilegious to do something? It is.
I'm sorry to say, but you just violated the gospel.
Why?
Because
it's not about the snow? It's not.
The snow is there just to cool the sugar into a taffy. Yes.
But the way I look at it is the residual sweetness that goes into the snow and the water, that if you're throwing that away, you're wasting that.
Well, that part of you is a good old Vermonter.
All right.
You're frugal, but
that's not the purpose of the snow.
No, we like to think the snow is there just to cool
to turn it into a taffy.
You see, when the sugar, what the sugar is nothing more than maple syrup that's been boiled beyond the syrup stage. A lot of people think, oh, I take syrup and I pour it on snow. They're going to lose the whole thing. It'll sink to the bottom.
Yes, it has to be the right temperature.
The temperature you cook the syrup to is 219 Fahrenheit. You cook that syrup to 234. And that just takes more water out, goes out as steam. And the product becomes thicker, so it will sit on snow and become a taffy. But until the snow cools it, it's a liquid, so you get to pour it over the snow.
Who in the heck created this sugar on snow concept idea thing?
Well, back in the day, the pioneer day, all sugar making, that's why it's called sugar making. They were boiling the product down beyond the syrup stage, and it served as sugar, and they stir it with a wooden paddle, and it would become a solid, soft sugar, and it would serve the sugar needs they hoped for the whole country.
Yeah.
And then along came the cheaper sugars from southern points.
Yeah.
And
cane sugar.
And it kind of put pure maple out of business because it was too expensive. And so the sugar makers had to figure out how to survive, and they just started boiling it less, calling it maple syrup. But the term never changed from sugar into syrup. And
MorseFarm.com is your website where you can pretty much order basically anything, most things in the store.
Yes.
But certainly you can buy any size syrup, decorative or otherwise, and ship it anywhere to your poor friends down south who don't have maple syrup down there. Gosh, I feel so horrible for all of them, those poor folks. MorseFarm.com, that's the way to do it.
Yep.
And they'll package it up at the farm. They'll package it up and get it shipped out.
And my nephew Jake is head of the shipping crew, and he's good. And because websites are up pops a certain shipping price, and we can't give away shipping because syrup is a spillable, heavy product.
Yeah.
But Jake will search out the lower, in many cases, a lower price shipping for people, option for people, and he'll actually email them or call them and tell them about it.
This before I forget, I know I'm going to forget, so I want to ask you right now while it's out fresh on my mind. Going back to this maple sugar, I believe up near the Colchester area, I think, who had all of his sap buckets, or most of them anyway, stolen, and he went out and replaced them. I'm assuming that they're still there, his replaced buckets, but I guess someone's looking to cash in on scrap metal. That's the whole idea behind something like that.
Well, if galvanized tin is worth anything on that level, I don't know. They might also be selling them to a tourist market. Excuse me. Buckets are old and very. They're seldom used anymore. In fact, I think that on a certain marketing level, it's illegal to use galvanized buckets anymore. You have to use either stainless steel or plastic. So there's an active tourist market for buckets. There's a market for artists who want to paint on them.
Of course.
There's backyard sugar makers that would buy buckets. So whoever stole those buckets had. I don't believe they'd send them to a scrap yard. They're going to turn them into pretty good money. Wow.
I can't remember who it was. It may have been Carol Porter, who I love to snowshoe up there on Maple Open House weekend and see his operation, where they're it's just to see the family up there in action. But I can't remember if it was Carol Porter or not, but someone told me something to the effect of, in Maine, if you get caught stealing somebody's lobster traps, it's legal to shoot them. And in Vermont, it should be legal to shoot somebody if they're tampering with or stealing your maple sugaring equipment or product. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it would be good.
It's happened quite a bit. You've heard the stories where folks have gone in and stolen the stainless
finished
steel.
syrup, that work and overhead that's incurred to make a drum of maple syrup.
Huge.
Anyone who would go into a sugar house that is off the road in the sticks enough so they can get by with it and steal that,
or vandalize.
They really should be. Most sugar makers have a backhoe,
Yeah, I do. So I had my mom up at the Tunbridge Fair this past year, and there was Elliot, and he had, of course, the steam was coming out, and boy, the smell of firewood. And of course he had water in there, but he was just trying to show what it was like. With the evaporator there, but we had quite a chuckle about that.
You know, we many times with the modern way of sugaring, the sap has to be run through the reverse osmosis machine to sweeten it before you put it in the evaporator.
Right.
So we're kind of in a rock and hard place sometimes where we are, because we bill it as a place to come and watch boiling. And much of the time, because of the modern sugaring ways, we're not boiling as much of the day as we used to be.
You're collecting more.
Yeah, and so we put in a little tiny evaporator in this dilapidated woodshed building we have right there. And we put the wood in it, and it's a crackling fire, and it's very rough. You're standing around in kind of muddy countryside to watch. But people like that better than they do a modern. In several places around the state, there's big modern facilities
that are fired by oil.
Fired by oil or gas or even electricity.
Yeah.
And people really want to see the old-fashioned way. So, and I admit, when I'm out there in the woodshed doing it, that it's not a serious operation, folks.
Yeah.
Don't mistake this for anything serious. But I'm doing it this way because that's all the sap I have today, and want to show you how it's done.
Yeah.
And they just love it.
They love it.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in taste with the wood-fired as opposed to a more, with an oil-fired burner?
No, there isn't. And you hear that there is. There are purists walking around who say, "Oh, they've screwed up. The taste is nothing better than a syrup made over a wood fire." And it is bunk. I'm sorry, but I'll say that they've had blind tasting tests over at the Vtmaple Research Center, University of Vermont, and the blind tasters could not taste a difference between the syrup made the modern way through reverse osmosis and oil fires, and the syrup that was made without reverse osmosis on a wood fire. They couldn't taste the difference.
So dumbing it down, it's basically reverse osmosis is a technology that removes as much water as possible from the sap so that what you're left with is the highest concentrate of sap, so that when you're boiling it, you're producing syrup the most efficient way. Am I right?
Yes, it's at 40 gallons to 1. That's how much sap it takes to make 1 gallon of maple syrup at an average tree sweetness of 2%. It takes a huge amount of fuel, whether you're burning oil or wood. If you're burning oil, it's going to take, used to take upwards of around 4 gallons of oil for every 1 gallon of maple syrup you made. And with today, the image that oil has is, as far as its wear and tear on the earth, and I'm not going to say that's wrong. You don't want to burn that much oil to make a gallon of syrup. So we use the reverse osmosis machine, which will take the sap through membranes, and somehow it sorts out the water from the sugar to a large degree. So it'll take up to 80%, an intricate filter. It'll take up to 80% of the water out. And one way I'll put it is, at the 2%, it's 40 to 1. You bring at our place, we're bringing the sap up to about a 12%, and that's closer to like 8 gallons to make 1 gallon.
Isn't that something
And so
else?
our oil usage is brought down from 4 gallons, where it used to be, to 1 quart.
Isn't that amazing? You wear so many hats. You do so many different things in your life. Most of the time, where are you? Up at Morse Farm.
Oh, I'm just in a deep fog somewhere.
I'm sure you are. But you learned how to play trombone, I'm guessing, when you were a youngin'?
Well, I did, and then I did fulfilled my military duty by being in a military band, and I got a lot of contacts, musical contacts, and I guess I play well enough, so I've been part of a lot of different bands around, big bands and symphony orchestras and stuff. So yeah, that's been fun. That keeps me a little bit sane.
I saw you up on stage with Chad Hollister more than once.
Yeah, my son Tommy was a member of his group, and Chad knew the old man played a little bit, so he asked me to come in and sit in.
Wow. So going back to the old days, which is something that I love to chat with you about, I would love for you. You're also an author, along with the trombone player and sugar maker and everything else. You have written a column in the Times-Argus and Rutland Herald for I don't know how many years. Long
be 12, 14, something like that.
Yeah. Tell us about the column, and tell us about your two books that we have here on the table.
Well, I used to aspire to be a writer, and I guess I had flair to write. My teachers said that. And then in the process of agreeing to be the farmer at Morse Farm and raising a family, I forgot how to sign my name for 20 years. And then someone suggested maybe I could write something to enliven our website, and he didn't know that I sort of could write, and so I said, okay, I'll give it a try. Started writing and sending out a twice a month newsletter called News from Vermont on our website, and people kept, the comments I kept hearing were, wow, we like it.
Yeah.
You got to write a book.
Yeah.
So I have written 3 books, mostly compilations of the stories that I write, and those stories, well, I sort of tweaked our email list once and added one of the editors of the Times-Argus, thinking maybe they'll like it.
Was it Steve Pappas?
No, it was Andrew Nemeth.
Okay. Yeah.
I put him right on my email list. I just bammed him, I guess.
Yeah.
And one day I met Andy on the street, and he said, Burr, we like what you write. We want to run it as a column.
Wow.
And it's been happening ever since. I will say maybe not so much right now because I'm too busy sugaring.
You're too busy to write.
Yeah.
Although you're probably always writing up here.
Well, I always have an ear out for interesting people, characters, or interesting situations, and sometimes I think I'm going to run out of them. But you're a writer too, JD. You know, you're always gonna be collecting those interesting things.
It's about writing them in your mind is one thing, but capturing them on paper before that fish slips off the hook is big time. I find myself pulling over on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And even if I'm running late for something or the phone's ringing or whatever, I got to write that down before I lose it.
Yeah. You do.
Would you be willing to share with us one of your writings from one of your books, Sweet Days and Beyond, and Sugar Words?
Sugar Words, and then the one in between, which I didn't bring today, would have been Golden Times, Tales Through the Sugar House Window. I searched through the archives, and my wife read this one, and she said it involves Harry Morse, so anything that involves Harry Morse would be a good one. So I'll read this. It's
Please and thank you.
Okay.
Burr Morse, ladies and gentlemen.
It seems everyone these days wants to talk about the weird winter we've had, and being in both the maple sugaring and ski businesses, we're prime targets. In fact, the other day, I had just driven my Toyota Sienna down into the sugar woods to tap the trees when I got a call from my buddy Bill. Bill was chuckling over seeing me use that particular mode of transportation for an off-road purpose in February. What would your dad have thought, he asked. What Bill didn't know was that my dad, Harry Morse, was the king of creativity when it came to unorthodox motoring. He once extracted a school bus stuck in the mud with a Plymouth Duster, and commonly jump-started our 12-ton bulldozer with a Chrysler Newport. So Bill, driving out to the woods in February in a minivan, would have been a piece of cake to him. Make that pure maple sugar cake. Looking back, the winter of 1981 stands out as a carbon copy of this winter. My dad and I had seen the handwriting on the wall with buckets hanging on trees. It was clear that plastic tubing was the future of maple sugaring. We spent most of that winter tubing up our west sugar woods, and since we could not afford a pickup truck back then, drove my dad's car uphill through the pasture to the sugar woods all winter long. So, Bill, you see, I learned wintertime off-roading with the family sedan from my dad. In fact, Harry Morse was famous with the vegetable farmers all over in Mallett's Bay for his version of the old clowns in a tiny car caper, only his clowns were vegetables. Back when we were growing vegetables on this place, Dad would often visit the farms at Mallett's Bay where, because of the lake effect, the season was 2 weeks earlier than ours. He'd buy vegetables to sell before ours were ready. Again, things were perpetually tight on the farm in those days, and we had no pickup truck. Most famous with Mallett's Bay farmer Sam Mazza was Harry Morse's Volkswagen Rabbit. That Rabbit was an amazing machine because it seemingly had no limits to what it could haul. Harry Morse would call ahead with his order so it could be picked fresh and ready, all by the bushel. 10 of sweet corn, 3 of peas, 3 of green beans, 3 of yellow beans, zucchini, summer squash, and, oh, some of those special sweet onions. He'd pull in the yard, Rabbit steaming hot from 48 miles of interstate driving, and his order would be waiting. Sam, no doubt, hoping Harry had blossomed out with a pickup truck since their last meeting, would shake his head and grin. Harry, he'd say, don't know how you're going to get all this in. Might have to make a second trip. Harry Morse responded with a wink. Don't you worry, Sam. I'll get it in come hell or high water. My father would pack bushel bags and boxes in and on top of that Rabbit until it looked like the modern version of a Dust Bowl Model A, but just as ready for transit. Harry made dozens of trips there over the years and never had a problem on the road. That's how we used to do things on our farm, bare bones and on the fly. Still do, in fact. Like in this snowless winter, with the countryside as firm as a blacktop road and the maple trees that need to be tapped. And I will say that was way back, one of my earlier writings, but this year is totally opposite. There's too darn much snow out there.
Yeah. What a great story. That's so fantastic. Yeah, and one that, oh gosh, stuff like that just has to be told. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Same with your stories of your best friends, the dog.
My old dog Buddy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Buddy, I remember.
And I've had a I've had a little bit of a I guess a sabbatical, if you will, from my writing. I've just had a baby.
Oh, wow.
I have
Congratulations.
A 4-year-old little girl who's got most of my time. And got me wrapped around
great.
her little finger. And just some changes with mom and dad and their health that's prioritized. There's only so many hours in the day, as you know. You know.
Life somehow catches up.
Yeah. I just love stories like that. Did he ever get a pickup?
Oh yes. Yeah. Well, he's gone. He passed on in 1999, but now I'm sure Harry would say, Burr, you've got too damn much equipment around there.
I remember a couple of years ago, there were some tourists that were chatting with Elliot up at the Tunbridge Fair, and I came up behind them, and I kind of gave Elliot a little wink, and I said, Elliot, Tell him about the special syrup that comes out of the pine tree. And he never missed a beat. I mean, he just went into this explanation.
Elliot took over from my dad when he passed on. Elliot used to be, believe it or not, fairly quiet and reserved. And then when Harry died, Elliot just reveled, and he's theatrical in his manner, and really full of, and we won't say that on television.
Full of it.
But the initials would be BS.
Yeah. That's so funny. Hey, where do you get the name Burr from? B-U-R-R.
Well,
what is that all about?
Well, the true story is my sister was 3. Susie was 3 when I was born, and she couldn't pronounce baby brother, so she shortened it to Burr, and that stuck.
Wow.
The longer version is I was born on March 16th in a blizzard, and my mother got to Heaton Hospital, and she was pacing in the room waiting for my arrival. And on that date in Vermont, we can have anything for weather. We can have snowy blizzards or terrible mud or rain, or once in a while good sunshine. And she went to the window, and she opened. It was a blizzard. She opened up the curtains, and she said, "Brr." And if it had been muddy and overcast, she would open up those curtains, and she would said, "Yuck."
Oh. Isn't that something?
And so I'm glad it was a blizzard that day.
Yeah. So speaking of March 16th, your birthday, what do you like to see about at the point of your birthday for weather, collection?
Well, many.
That's kind of March 16th is kind of a barometer for you.
It is, and I tell many people who come to me and say, "Getting pretty late, isn't it?" And it's say March 15th, and I tell them my birthday is March 16th, and I'm 71 years old, and about half of those birthdays we've been making syrup by March 16th, and about half of the others we haven't. So it's not late. But here it is April 1st, and we haven't made a lot of maple syrup, and it is late now.
Wow. I remember there were some folks that were touring the Morse Farm years ago who were confused why you weren't boiling during the foliage, because they just assumed that that's when the trees would produce the sap. Are you able to answer these folks with a straight face?
Yes, I don't want to ever be construed. I don't want it to be disrespectful ever. So I'm just honest, like a Vermonter should be, and tell them that sugaring is totally unique, and part of the uniqueness is it's short. It only happens in the spring. You may get 1 week of it, you may get 6 weeks of it, but that's all you get. Yeah. And no other time of year will sap run out of the tree, and if it did, it wouldn't be the right kind of sap.
What's a crappy year for total gallons?
Oh, well, we've increased our taps and kind of skewed the volume, but a crappy. I mean, here it is, April 1st, and we've only made it 200 gallons.
Okay.
And we should make 2,000 gallons. So that would be if we get a warm spell in mid. And my wife would counsel me for this because she says I'm too darn negative, but I always think of what could go wrong.
Yeah.
And if we get a warm spell in a couple of weeks and it ends sugaring, those better be pretty darn intensive weeks if we're going to come up anywhere near 2,000 gallons.
Sure. Grade B, that's a newer grade that I think is later in the season. Am I right?
Yes.
And that's for cooking and baking and great in recipes.
It's the latest, well, just about the latest in the season. It's made when the days are getting pretty warm, like up in the 60s or high 50s. It's the darkest and the strongest maple flavor, and about half the people say they like it best. I don't. Being a 7th generation sugar maker, I like the lighter, delicate, as do most all sugar makers. But now there's no such thing as grade B anymore. People say, why did that go away? And that fell victim to that new labeling law. So now it's called grade A, very dark, robust flavor.
So we have to add all those words in there.
Yeah.
Which takes up extra room from the marketing.
That's good for the printers. Got to keep them in business.
But the recipes, I mean, if you get on the Vermont Maple Association, I think it's .org.
Yes, it is.
Their site has got some, I mean, there's recipes everywhere. I mean, just Google it. But, man, from breads to, I mean, you name it.
Oh, maple is so good in just about any recipe. My wife told me once, I said, Betsy, why is your spaghetti sauce so good and mine is so bad, so bland? Yeah. And she said, the key to it is
I've heard this.
You got to add a little bit of sugar. So one time she was working and I was in charge of cooking my own supper. And I said, God, I'm not going to add sugar. I'm going to add a little maple syrup to the spaghetti sauce.
Yeah,
and I
breaks
did.
the acid.
Yeah, and was that good? And you can slather it on salmon, baking salmon.
Sure.
Scallops.
Cereal, coffee.
Put it in cereal.
Ice cream.
Coffee, tea, ice cream, any of that.
Some of these old fellers, like my dad, who's in his mid-80s, think that folks like me are absolutely insane for putting it in coffee. I love it.
Yeah. Well, it's a natural sweetener. It's pure. It's right out of a maple tree. A maple tree gets no pesticides, no fungicides, no lime, no fertilizer. They're wild beans.
Sure. Right.
And comes right out of them. How could it be anything but good?
Right, of course. Final question. My wife said to me, please ask Burr if there's any truth, even a smidgen, to the legend of the little Indian boy with the hatchet that's explained on so many containers. And if not, why take up the space to print that when we could take up the space and print how maple syrup is produced?
Well, there is truth to it, and my version, and of course being a legend, there's many versions, but I believe it's based in truth. The Indians found a maple tree that had been wounded in the spring. Say a heavy snow had settled on a limb and broken it off, and the sap water was dripping out of the wound, as it will do in the spring. They used that sap water, which tastes largely like water. Sweet water, a little bit sweet. They captured it and they used it to boil venison in. And as the steam went away, they had to keep adding more of this tree water. So by accident, they concentrated maple syrup, and the venison was hellishly good.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. What do you think of these companies that are putting the sap water in beverages now? They're coming out everywhere.
Well, it's more power to them. There's a term called value added, and maple sugar makers need to make money if they're going to stick around. And sometimes just selling a container of maple syrup is, they need a little extra, so people are being creative with maple these days and putting it in all sorts of different recipes and beverages and infused maple syrup and just all sorts of creativities coming out of this thing called pure maple.
But mostly sugarers are using that water to clean their equipment? Rinse it out?
The water, yes, every evaporator has a preheater which produces a condensate as the hot hot steam comes against the cold sap entering, it'll condense back to water. So there is that water. Then another byproduct from the reverse osmosis product is just pure water called permeate.
Yeah.
And some of that has to be saved to flush back through the RO membranes to cleanse them. And then there's a whole lot that either just goes down the drain or gets marketed somehow.
Wow. Burr Morse, my guest this time around on Aired Out. It is an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. I know this is a very busy time of year for you to come in here, and I certainly appreciate it very much.
Thank you, JD. It's my pleasure.
An absolute honor to have you. Fly on the Wall Productions and CVTV, Public Access Television, Channel 192 and 194. Thank them so much. CVTV723.org, Peak Entertainment of Vermont, New Hampshire, FGB Theaters, the Capitol Showplace in Montpelier, and Paramount Theater in Barrie, CBDcrave.com. You'll see the products always here on the table. Great guys, superior quality brands shipped straight to your door. Fontaine Forestry and Millworks of East Montpelier, and CW Print and Design in Barrie. I'm J.D. Green. We'll catch you next time. Friday night will be our next show here. The podcast Aired Out on YouTube and on Central Vermont Television. Thank you so much for subscribing and tuning in.